Okay, good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Gary Matsuoka, and we're at Laguna Hills Nursery in Santa Ana, and it's our class that introduces the bare root season. So all these fruit trees that you see here, the deciduous types, most of the deciduous types can be bought as a bare root, and generally, they'll look, now these are two dead ones and have on hand from last year's season, but this is about the average bare root. And generally, most of them will go somewhere between this size and this size within 1 year. So all these were bare roots this last winter, and some were a little bigger than this, but not by much. So these trees are grown in the Central Valley of California. In fact, most of the bare root trees in the U.S. are grown in the Central Valley of California, primarily because they have really good weather for bare root there. The interesting thing about the Central Valley, hot and dry all summer, uh, which is fine. But this time of year, when they're about ready to dig them out, so usually end of November through December, they plow them out of the ground. Well, the interesting thing about the southern part of the Central Valley, it's covered in fog for most of that time. So they can plow these out of the ground. They don't have to worry about them drying out on the surface because, if you have bare roots, you don't want them to dry out. But that tule fog that they get makes it real easy to do bare root. So it's an interesting area. So there's not many bare root growers left. So 15 years ago, we had three suppliers in California that were growing bare root for us. Right now, we've got one. So the choices are a little bit more limited, but the volume is certainly limited. The problem we've had is that, for between 2000 and 2019, the industry was shrinking because we didn't have many gardeners. The gardeners were getting old. The baby boomers were the main gardeners for all that time. Uh, so nurseries were losing about 5%, even more, 7% of the nurseries every year were going out of business because the volume was shrinking. And then when the pandemic started, suddenly we had twice as many gardeners. So the demand now is twice as high. We don't have the product. Now, one of our berry suppliers is coming back, but they may have to wait until the drought's over. So, because they weren't allocated any water, I don't think. So that's going to be another problem. But anyway, bare roots. The other way that fruit trees are grown are they're grown in little pots, not anything this size, containers that are 4 inches wide and 9 to 12 inches tall. And those trees are about this big, and that's kind of new trend. Even Dave Wilson Nursery, who grows these for us, is switching over to the small pots. The disadvantage of bare root is that you only have about 2 months to sell them. Uh, so you do a lot of work at one time of year, whereas if they're in containers, they can leisurely sell them year round. So most nurseries are switching that way, but we're going to miss, if they quit doing these, we're going to miss this because, say something this big is big enough to give you fruit the very first year. Whereas if we get them in little containers, then they're this big, second year at best. So these, when we get them, they come in a truck. They're all laying, they're bundled up into big bundles, laying sideways. We keep them watered. They come usually to us either at the 1st of January or the end of December. And at that time, it's easier because it's only about 70 degrees at that time. And then we have our displays out and back here that are concrete block bins, and then we fill them with sawdust, which is temporary medium. We just store them in sawdust. The proper way, which I used to do when I was younger, was put them in pure sand. Um, you get tired just putting a few trees in when you're working with sand. It is really heavy. So sawdust much easier. We just take our hand and move it aside, put the trees in, put it back, water them in. They stay nice and moist. Sawdust is not a good growing medium. Within 3 or 4 months, the plants just start rotting in it because it itself is rotting. But for the few weeks that we have them, I mean, last year bearroot season was essentially over in 2 weeks. Uh, Hopefully, now this year we've got more trees, and well, they confirmed we're getting more trees. We'll see what happens when they arrive. But our list is a little bit longer than last year. There are some things that we order every year that we weren't able to get for 2 or 3 years, and now we're getting them this year. So hopefully we'll have a better selection. So the biggest trees we get are usually over 1 inch in caliper, and this particular tree here is right around 1 inch, maybe an inch and a quarter, but sometimes we get them bigger than this. The smallest trees we get in are usually, and Dave Wilson doesn't send these out. We have to ask him, okay, if you have anything left that's this size, this is a 1/4 inch caliper, and this particular one didn't do much this year, so that's a chance we take. But generally, if you're an orchard grower, so if you own an orchard, you don't order anything that's close to this size because of the cost. So the typical orchard, they say, don't order anything thicker than a pencil, which is about the thickness of this stem here. So orchards plant trees with stems about pencil thick, and they're about this big. And by the end of the year, they're usually about this size. And then they might get a crop. They don't expect to get a good crop for 2 or 3 years after they plant them. But we like homeowners to have a little better experience than that. So generally, we'll have these in a big plastic bag. We use 3 mil plastic, which is pretty heavy. I mean, when you consider that trash bags are about 1 mil thick at most, we use 3 mil thick plastic bags so that the roots don't tear them. Occasionally do, we have to double bag them. And the root systems generally are like this. If we're planting, we don't want to cut the roots too much. We have to use a pot this big to get most of the fruit trees. If we're going to put them in containers, when it's round, you just dig a hole. So generally, if you're planting a bare root, the nice thing about it is that all you need is a shovel. So on the orchards, when they're planting, they said they spend about 20 seconds. So they have 2 guys with shovels digging a hole. And generally, it's not any deeper than about 10 inches, 12 inches at the most. Um, and then they just drop the bare root tree in there. Now, most bare root trees are grafted, so you will see little dog legs. So there's a straight trunk underneath the dirt here, and then it dog legs to the side, and you see the graft. This tree, it's hard to see from the back. This tree is grafted here. This tree is grafted right there. And that graft point is usually between 3 and 6 inches, maybe sometimes even 8 inches above ground level. So you'll see a graft point. Then you'll have your roots. Now, you don't have to be super accurate when you plant bare root trees. We want the roots to be all covered. I planted bare root trees this deep just to see if anything would go wrong, and nothing went wrong. But it's nice to plant them where they were originally, where the graft is usually 3 or 4 inches above ground level. Now these are a 2-year crop in the Central Valley, so they grow the roots. They put the rootstock in the ground in the winter, and most nurseries that do fruit trees actually buy them from a rootstock nursery. So there are nurseries across the United States that specialize in growing the rootstock for these trees. And then they send them, and they're usually, trees that are rooted, have roots on the bottom that are about this big. So these growers stick them in the ground during the summer, during the middle of winter, and then come close to summer, what they did in the winter before is they cut branches off the trees that they want to use for grafting, getting the budwood off of. But they store them in the fridge until June, and then they take them out, peel off one bud on that, and stick it into the rootstock that's growing in the ground in June. So it's June budding. They let it grow for a year and a half, and then they dig them out and sell them to us. Occasionally, they can do it the first year. I mean, it's so warm in the Central Valley. Like this year, we had more growth than we've seen in the last, I would say, 5 or 6 years, because this summer was actually warm, a little warmer than normal. Not extremely warm, but a little warmer than normal. And most of our plants grew 3 feet over summer. It was crazy. We had excellent growth this year, which we hadn't seen since maybe 2016, 2015. We had several really warm years there where the whole year was warm. So this year was close to that, and we actually had some good growth. So occasionally the growers will send, they'll dig out some trees on their first winter and sell them to us at that time. But usually it's the second winter that we get these. So when you plant them, you want the roots to be covered. If a few roots show, it's not usually that big a deal. But on some of the more sensitive plants, like the stone fruit trees, apricots, cherries, plums, peaches, nectarines, it's unusual for us to lose any. And it's really unusual for our customers to lose any. I mean, the worst thing you can ever do is let a gardener plant your bareroot trees. That's when we have them, because the gardeners think they know what they're doing, and unfortunately, our trade has taught them the wrong way how to do things. They'll get, you know, we sell these January into February, and then sometimes March or April we'll get some trees back, and we look at them and they stink because they were planted in pure planter mix. So the gardener thinks, oh, soil is no good. We'll just fill this hole with planter mix, which is compost, ground up dead trees. Well, there's no plant in the world that wants to try to live in a ground up dead rotten tree. And that's what planter mix is this dead rotten trees. They don't like it at all. So they just rot in there, and then they bring them back, and now we haven't seen one planted upside down yet. A couple years ago, we sell bareroot roses too, and a lady said, "Well, my roses haven't sprouted. My gardener planted them, and they haven't sprouted yet." So she sent me a picture, and they're all planted upside down, roots in the air. So so gardeners, there's certainly various levels of knowledge there. So anyway, you just get them in the ground. Now, the one thing you have to worry about is the first time you water it, the dirt's going to settle. So it's nice to hold the trunk straight while the dirt's settling, because sometimes if the dirt settles, they might go crooked a little bit, and it's real hard to straighten them out again. So that very first watering you do, hold the trunk straight as the water settles. You can tap the trunk to straighten out a little bit, then water again, tap it if it goes crooked on you. But that first watering is important because the dirt kind of settles unevenly. If you want your tree to be straight, it's not. And orchards don't buy trees of this quality. The stuff they buy usually has bows in it, or has crooked trunks because they're cheaper. They have different grades: retail grade and orchard grade. So the orchard ones, they're not real picky about having them aesthetically perfect. Most homeowners would rather see what. So get them in the ground, water them once, and generally from that point on, you're good for about 2 or 3 months. So these, it is hopefully the rainy season this coming year, where you won't have to touch them. Usually, bare root trees grow out, start growing around March, sometimes late February or March, but they really don't have substantial number of leaves till April. So most years you don't have to water them until April. They just haven't grown that much. And if we get anything close to normal rain, we may not have to water till May. Back when I started growing bare roots back in the 1980s, yeah, I put them in January and never ever watered them till June because we had rain those years. So we'll see what happens this year. So planting, commercially, they do not fertilize the first year. Mainly if they fertilize, they get so much growth, like something like this, that the wind might start making them tilt. So they'd rather just keep them quiet. They'll grow maybe 2 or 3 feet without fertilizer, not 5 or 6 or 7 feet. Uh, so they don't have to stake them. So it keeps them from having to stake their trees. Homeowners, I'd rather see a nice growth that first year, so we usually fertilize. So we'll throw in the ground, we'll throw in something organic, either one of these true fruit tree fertilizers or fine Dr. Earth or down to earth fertilizer. They're excellent fertilizers for that purpose. And generally, most organic fertilizers, it's about 1 cup per inch of trunk diameter. And with most bare root fruit trees, if you just fertilize them once the first year, you're fine. You don't have to go overboard on it at all. I mean, most of these fruit trees are really good at growing. And for most homeowners, you don't want them that big. We'll talk about that a little later. Well, we can talk about it now. So, what we know about fruit trees and what orchards have been told too is that the best production in a farm is if you keep your fruit tree only about 5 foot wide. If you have a fruit tree that's 5 foot wide and perhaps say 8 foot tall, you're going to get more fruit per square foot than if it grows bigger than that. And you see, this tree here is already 5 feet wide. It hasn't filled in totally in the center, but it's already about 5 foot wide, and so is this. Well, not quite. This is about 4 foot wide. So they're already around just about the right dimensions for a fruit tree. Most fruit trees, they're more productive if you have just one trunk and everything else fairly horizontal, and that'd be perfect. Now, there are some fruit trees that are too vigorous with one trunk. If you just have one trunk, the branches grow too fast, although you can just trim them. So with peach trees, sometimes in orchards, instead of one trunk, they'll allow them to have 2 or even 3 uprights. So they're not so vigorous. So the rest of the tree is not so vigorous. But with a lot of fruit trees, one trunk, side branching, is just fine. You'll get more production per square foot. Now, in the old days, and there's still these books around that tell you the way you train a fruit tree is you train it 15 to 20 foot across with 16 upright trunks. So that was the old method, is to cut the trees down to knee height when you plant them, and then force them to go out to 2 trunks the first year, and then second year you cut them down again, 4 trunks the second year, and then you cut them down again, 8 trunks the third year, and you keep doing that until you get 16 uprights and a tree about 20 foot wide. So that was the old method. They thought the open center gave you the best fruit production. And it's true that trees naturally, as the branches get longer, they open up. So if you let a tree grow 20 foot, 15, 20 foot, the branches do this, they open up. And when they hit horizontal, that's their best production. But now they're saying, well, the problem with that is that the sunlight only penetrates about 2.5 feet through the foliage. So you have a tree with 2.5 foot of production over the top and sides, and the inside of this tree is totally non-productive. You could have done better if you just kept the tree 5 foot wide. The whole tree is productive because the sunlight gets all the way to the middle. So the other problem with having a 15-foot wide, 20-foot wide tree, and this is what I did when I was younger back in the 80s, because that's all the reference book said. So I had a plum tree that was 15 foot wide. That's 400 plums. They ripen in 2 weeks. One rolled it up, Now, fortunately, I own a store, so I can take 10 to 15 plums a day to the store and let people taste them. But I could eat maybe what, 1/10 of that? One less than 1/10 of that. I was only eating a couple plums a day. So it's like that was a total waste of, overproduction. That's way overproduction for the average homeowner. If you have a tree that's only 5 foot wide, that's less than 100 fruit. And if you have 2 weeks to eat them, if you have a family of 4 or 5, you might be able to eat all of them. You still have to give a few away, but you have a better chance. So in the place of one 15-foot wide tree, now we know you can put 9 separate trees in there with 9 separate varieties and 9 separate harvest grades. And that's better for a homeowner than having one big tree. So it's a little harder to maintain them at this size. They want to get bigger. Generally, what happens with fruit trees, you keep trimming them down to this size for about 3 or 4 years. They just stop trying to get bigger after that. I've seen that in my yard. So if you keep cutting them every year to a certain size, after a while they get used to that and they just stay that size. One thing to know about fruit trees is they have a wide variation in lifespan. So the shortest lived fruit trees, other than papayas, but among these deciduous fruit trees, peaches and nectarines, average length of life for an orchard is 13 years.
Oh, really?
So in the old days, they used to keep them around for 25, but when they did the statistics on the production, they found out, well, they're best until they're about 10, then they start dropping off. So what's the use of having for 25 if you're not getting your money's worth? And in fact, in the old days, when they trained them to 20 foot across, 15, 20 foot across, they said they spend half of their productive life shaping the tree. So they don't do that anymore. They don't make them have 16 uprights because it takes 5 years to do that. And that was the best fruiting years of that plant's life. They're doing training on it. And then they only had 6 or 7 more years of good production. And then it's time to pull the tree out. So now they just do between 1 and 3 or 4 trunks. They just spend 1 year training them and then they let them fruit. On the flip side, apples have the longest lifespan. Apple trees, 150 years is not unusual. So they can go forever. The reason that trees have different lifespans is how well they heal their wounds. So we're pruning fruit trees constantly to keep them productive with better quality fruit. Apples heal better than any plant, no, better than any plant. It doesn't have to be a fruit tree. When they check plants in general, apples heal. You can cut it, they heal that wound really well. No dieback. Whereas stone fruit are really bad at it, and peaches really bad. So you prune a peach, you prune a branch off. This was a peach tree. You prune a branch off. You've got a dead spot inside that branch all the way down to the roots, the same size as what you cut. So they don't seal well at all. So you're cutting your trees and you're causing it to die slowly. So peaches, nectarines are the worst. Apples are the best. They're all related. These are all in the rose family. Um, Plums usually 20 to 30 years. Same with apricots, 20, 30 years. They don't prune them as much as they do peaches and nectarines. Pomegranates can live 500 years, but they say the best production is the first 25. That goes true with quite a few trees. Persimmons can live a long time. So. Okay, so if you're going about 5 foot wide, that's if you have say 100 square feet, that's roughly 3 trees for every 100 square feet of land. Now there are other ways you can do this. So Dave Wilson Nursery, they have a good website, and they'll have a little instruction thing you can click on. It says backyard orchard culture, and they'll tell you how you can range your trees, either say 7 foot apart if you're going to grow them as a single tree. You can hedge them with trunks 3 feet apart as a hedge. I try that. I don't like 3 foot. I'd rather go 4 feet between trunks. I think 3 foot's a little bit tight, but there are people who use 3 foot spacing between trunk to trunk, 3 foot spacing, and grow them as a hedge. And your other method, which we used in the 1980s and 90s, was to, instead of placing one tree singly, looking from the top, you'd place up to 5 trees in a group and let this group grow 10 foot wide. And what was interesting when I did this with quite a few number of trees, is that there was very few crossing branches in there. All these trees want to do is go out to where the sun was. So they mainly acted like one tree. So, if you put 5 trees in the space of one, you won't get a tree that's 5 times bigger. They're only programmed to grow a certain number of feet in one direction. So it's easy to keep this whole thing about 10 foot across. I went about 24 inches between trunks. They say down to 16 is okay. I actually did 2 or 3 inches to see what that would do. And what happens when you put trees too close together, they're so one-sided that the way the fruit starts pulling them apart, they start tilting outwards. So I just tied them together. It still worked. So you can do that. This looks a little prettier than having, rows of trees 7 foot apart. If you group them, so you have multi-trunk trees that are 10 foot wide, but made up of 5 varieties, say, that looks and make sure they look better if they're all the same, like all peaches or all apples or all plums. It looks a little better than having single trees every 7 feet throughout your yard. My first yard back in the 80s, before I even knew this, I actually did that. I had fruit tree every 7 feet because I wanted volume. I was single at the time. When I got married, everything changed. I didn't want that look anymore in the backyard, but I actually did this unknowing that this would be what they settled on for orchards in the future. I didn't know about this, the horizontal branching from those fruit trees makes them more productive, because most of my fruit trees did this, which is not very productive. Usually, if the branches are going straight up, you get fruit at the very tops of the branches, because that's where the sun's hitting. So you don't get as much production as if you have with doing this.
Here. Now, what do you recommend, let's say, in terms of spacing, if you're going to be growing them?
Well, containers, if you have, a container, the number 15 pot, 4 or 5 foot wide is good. You can go a little big, the 20 gallon is a little bit nicer than the 15. The problem with, okay, so the disadvantage of big containers is always the fact that it dries out too fast. If the tree is this big, it's going to be dry within a day. If I kept this tree in this size container this big, that would be better for fruit quality. So if you don't have a dripper on it that can turn on more than once a day, with this size tree is going to be dry by the day. That affects fruit size. So if the tree dries out during the day, the fruit stays small. But if you have a drip system and you can water it several times a day, you'll get full-size fruit. So the generally fruit quality and fruit size is due to how many fruits on the tree and how much water the tree has in it. Those two things. The more fruit on the tree, the smaller the fruit is. The more water you give, the bigger the fruit is. The fewer the fruit tree, the bigger the fruit, and usually the better it tastes is. So it's interesting. They did it back in the 80s when the Fuji apple became real popular. The growers were getting so much money that a lot of them cheated and allowed too much fruit to grow. So in the late 80s, the Fuji apple started being really bland because they're producing too many apples. They're getting too much money, so they wanted to make more apples than the tree was capable of producing. So the the apple council, whoever governs this, told the growers you have to cut thinner apples out to get the quality back up. And so the University of California, Davis actually did a study where they found out that to get best quality Fuji apples, one apple per every 27 leaves. So if someone actually sat there and counted leaves on the apple tree to see how much fruit that tree can actually ripen properly. And it was one apple for every 27. You can put different kinds. This looks funny. It still works, but it looks funny to have apples, say, and peaches and plums all mixed together. Plus, they grow different styles. So apples, you kind of train one way. Most plums and apricots, you train like a fan. But apples, you train with the single trunk and side branching. Same with pears, same with peaches. We do that kind of style of training. And we'll go over that. We'll have class the next few months on specific types of trees so you get more detail on how to grow them. Okay, so early care, generally you just want them to grow until summer, and then come summer you can start training your trees. Say June is when you start pinching them and doing other things. We'll go over that the next few months. But today we just want to get it in the ground, get it fertilized, watered. It's nice to put, by summer it's nice to put a deep mulch on top of the ground. None of these trees mind having mulch piled against the trunk. It doesn't bother them at all. And again, no planter mix in the ground. We'd rather see these in the real dirt than in our potting soil in the ground. If you put them in our potting soil in the ground, our potting soil, which is our top pot, won't stay as moist as the native soil. Native soil with a little bit of clay content stays wetter than potting soil. In pots, you need to use our potting soil. Dirt in a pot holds water too much, the water won't drain at all. So if you've ever unless you have really, really sandy soil, you can't put it in a container and expect it to drain. The water just sits in it. Because in the ground, the rest of the soil around your soil acts like a sponge, so it pulls the water away from the plant. Even though it wants to hold it there, it pulls it out. The container, there's nothing pulling it, so you have to use something that's coarser and lighter, like our top potting soil. Now, most potting soils will kill bare root. That's not our brand. There's only a few brands out there that can grow a fruit tree. Fox Farm, Sungrow makes some types of potting soils that will actually work. Most potting soils will kill a lot of these trees because most potting soils made out of ground up trees. So it's like trying to grow, trying to make your house out of dead people. This doesn't work too well. Okay.
How deep the mulch, you were talking about the mulching in the summer.
Some orchards are 1.5 feet deep.
Oh, wow.
I read one orchard where they say 5 foot, and I go, it's got to be a typo. It's got to be. I read that thing like 20 times. Kept saying to myself, it's got to be a typo. They apply 5 foot of mulcher in a year. Now, it may be that it's decomposing so fast it never gets that high because mulch decomposes rapidly. But there are orchards that maintain an 18-inch layer. So that's deep.
Yeah.
That is deep.
Well, I mean, for the homeowner, what would you say?
As deep as you can stand it.
Well, kind of all.
Well, ground up trees is natural. I mean, leaves is the best. Ground up trees, if you call one of the things that people do, there's supposedly this app out there where you can tell the tree trimmers area if you have a load that you're taking to dump, just dump it on my driveway, and they'll dump it for supposedly for free. You're supposed to tip them. Of course, you get a mountain of mulch then. And that's what the orchards do is they have the tree trimmers just dump the tree trimmings in their orchard and they'll put it down this deep. And you don't have to compost it first. Nature doesn't have compost piles. You just throw it on the ground raw and it's fine. Of course, that's not totally natural. In nature, branches don't grind themselves in a million pieces before they fall on the ground. Leaves is more natural. But and then branches, you just get the big branches on. Okay, well, I should mention in containers, we usually put Osmocote in our top pot only because, in the ground's set up to make organic fertilizers work quickly. In a container, because there's no organisms in our potting, so it's sterile when you get it, the Osmocote works a little quicker. So if you want to get them started with something that's chemical that works faster, this is what we do. And then when we need to feed them again, we'll throw on something like this because in the long run, the organics are better, but they don't work real fast in the pot. Okay, so the next thing to know is that even though we're blessed with subtrop, subtropical climate, no, yeah, we're called a subtropical climate. So we have enough temperate climate in the winter to get a lot of these trees growing and producing, but we're marginal. So especially like 2014, 2015, 2016, years without any winters at all. I mean, during those winters, we had 90 degrees middle of January, and it wasn't good for these trees. We're getting cooler again. So it goes in cycles. I mean, back in the early 80s, when I first started growing fruit trees, we had the hot winters. I mean, really hot winters. And we were throwing away plum trees and peach trees. They wouldn't wake up because they didn't have a winter. And then in the late 80s, we had winters. We had the average nighttime temperature in the late 80s was at about 34. And we hit the lowest 1990. We went down to 23. And that's the record for all of California was 1990, December 1990. 13 up in San Francisco, 18 in Escondido. It was cold that year. Uh, and then we've been gradually getting warmer and warmer until maybe 2016 was one of the warmest winters we've seen, and now it's going the other way. This last winter was actually the coolest we've seen since maybe 2012. So we got things to produce again that hadn't produced. So there is something called a minimum. Oh, we got a name. Minimum soil requirement that a lot of trees have it. Um, all the stone fruit definitely have a minimum soil requirement. Apples have it, but they don't often need to use it, which is, I'll explain that in a second. Pears, same thing, although pear is not as good as apples. But there are some trees that don't have a soil requirement. So the reason why these trees have a soil requirement is because most of these trees evolved in a temperate climate, not unlike Georgia. So most of the fruit trees in the world come from Asia because they've been, culture has been there a lot longer. So man's been manipulating the fruit trees longer than they have in America. But so most of the trees are from China, India, the Caucasus Mountain region, um, where humans were a long, long time ago. But the temperate climates, say in India and China, are like Georgia, Tennessee, where you can have an 80-degree day in the winter. Now, you don't want your fruit tree to wake up in the middle of winter. So, what these trees have done is they have a chemical in the buds, the flower buds and the leaf buds in the branches that keeps them sleeping until they've been exposed to so much winter. So the temperature at which they're exposed to that they need to get rid of their dormancy is between 34 and 55 degrees Fahrenheit. It's strange that below freezing they don't get any chill, but kind of makes sense because if everything's frozen here, nothing's working. So between 34 and 40 and 55 degrees, uh, the chemicals that keep them dormant, keep them from sprouting out right away, are being broken down. And after a certain number of hours of this accumulating over the winter, then with the next warm spell, they start growing. So if you're in Georgia, you want to stay sleeping for at least, say, 500 hours of winter, because they have a good 500 hours of temperatures in this range during wintertime, and you don't want to wake up and then go down below freezing because you lose all your flowers and your crop for that year. So they will stay sleeping until they get 500 hours. The Central Valley, California, most fruit trees that are grown there, 500 to 1,000 hours of chill. Now, we don't get that here. Right here in our nursery this last year, we got maybe 320 hours. Now, some references will tell you it's 34 to 45, but that doesn't make any sense at all because we don't have, last year even, we didn't have much time between 34 and 45. Most of it was between 45 and 55. So the University of, I think it was Utah, said, yeah, it's up to 55. You get less chill above, you get your maximum chill, they said, in fact, right around 45 degrees, better than 34. And it's so it's lower at 34 and it's lowest at 55, but you get chill between there. You get your maximum right around 45, 46. So you might get more than 1 hour chill for every hour you spend there. You get less when you get to 55, you get less when you get down to 34. Yes.
How can you find out what the chill hours, the average in, like my zip code say, or is there a way to find out? Because
Well, not, it's fairly accurate. So there's a website, University of California, or one of the websites that has chill hours recorded at certain stations around California. So the closest to us, there's one in Long Beach, there's one at the field station in Irvine, there's one at in San Clemente. Those are the closest three to us. But the one in Long Beach is right next to the LA River. So the thing about
they don't have one like I live in Newport Beach where it's
no,
not as hot.
you can now if you ever you can buy recording thermometers and set one up in your backyard.
Well, you mean I record it every day and then do an average or something.
Right. So the thing about cold air is that, so if you live on a mountain, the mountains are colder. It's 1 degree for every 200-foot altitude, and only because the air is thinner. So temperature is caused by warmness is caused by how many molecules of air are hitting you per second, per unit of time. So if you have a lot of collisions with air molecules, you stay warmer. If you have fewer collisions, you're colder. So cold air, the molecules, of course, moving slower. But on the mountains, there's fewer molecules. So the mountains are 2 degrees, 1 degree cooler for every 200 foot straight up. So in Orange County, there are some 1,000-foot, Saddlebacks, of course, 5,000 foot. So it's cooler up there. But cold air, being heavier, always moves into the canyons. So So the warmest areas in Orange County are on the hilltops because the cold air won't stay there. The cold air always goes down to the next little gully. And the most areas that get the most chill accumulated are the riverbeds. So if you live near a creek or a riverbed, you're cold. I mean, Trabuco Creek up at the base of Saddleback Mountain, customers will say by Thanksgiving they're hitting 19 degrees in that riverbed, just above, just along Trabuco. What is it? Near Cook's, well, just inland from Cook's Corner. They're hitting 19 degrees at night in those canyons, so they get a lot of chill. But the same hilltops right above them get the least amount of chill because cold air is flowing downwards. So we know that the people who live on the hills here above Tustin, they hardly get any cold there. They grow great papayas. Papayas do real well because the ground just does not get cold on these hilltops. But in the canyons below them, it gets really cool. The Santa Ana River is one of the coolest spots in Orange County. So if you look at the Sunset Western Garden book where they say where plums do well, it's along this. It's within a half mile of the Santa Ana River. Plums do really well there because they need chill, and the Santa Ana riverbed, all the cold air from the mountains all around Orange County, even some cold air maybe from Riverside County, travels down that riverbed to the ocean. So anyone who lives within a half mile of say the Santa River gets maybe 400 to 500 hours of chill. So right here, last year we got 320, and the hilltops maybe 300 or even 250.
How
So
far are you here from Santa Ana River?
it's probably
A mile and a half?
4 or 5
4 or
miles.
5 miles? I guess I'm probably thinking Santiago Creek.
Well, we're pretty close to that,
Yeah.
but we're kind of on a plateau here because the freeway's like a riverbed.
Mm-hmm.
So all the cold air goes down. If you plant a tree in the middle of the freeway there, you'll get some good fruit.
But you're really close to it.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
you're a little older.
So you can, and people who live on hills, they know this. I mean, if you walk down a hill in the middle of winter, especially in the evening or morning, you'll feel the air getting colder. You go down the hill. I mean, I used to live on a hill in Mission Viejo above Trabuco Creek. And our hill, I was there on a January morning. The sprinklers were going off. Got down halfway down the hill, and the sprinklers were making ice on the sidewalks.
Oh my.
Because halfway down the hill was a lot colder than where I was. So, just a few feet, you get a lot. In fact, even, one of the reasons you want to keep your fruit tree short, the air 10 feet off the ground can be 6 degrees warmer than it is 4 feet off the ground. So cold air does drop. There's a lot of variation just in height off the ground on a very still night. If the wind's blowing, everything's the same, but if the wind's very still, the air is very still, you have this temperature gradient. So one of my friends who lives down in San Diego County says he's got a property that goes from the hilltop down to the little creek bed. It says 25 degrees difference top to bottom in the middle of winter at night. 25 degrees difference.
That's
And I think it was only about a 50-foot drop.
that's
So,
a lot.
that's a big difference. So he can certainly he put citrus, bananas, things on the top of the hill, cherries, apples at the bottom of the hill. So yeah, so if you have hillside, you can do a lot of different things. But if you're on flat ground, Orange County, you're actually sitting pretty good for most of these things. Now, when we had those no winters, some of the field stations said we had only about 50 hours of chill those years, but we knew that they're not using the right formula because most of our fruit trees still woke up okay, but a lot of them that needed 300 hours didn't wake up. So even if you look at the field station hours, you have to kind of know that they're using probably the University of California formula. Well, I think they use the Utah formula too. I think they have two chills you can look at. Basically, yeah. I mean, when I started growing fruit trees in the early 80s, I didn't get anything. I'm going, well, this is kind of a waste. And then the late 80s, we were getting 500, 400, 500 hours of chill. Out of heaven. I mean, every single plum tree in my yard fruited, every single pear tree in my yard fruited. And I thought, well, we can grow all these plums and pears. And then in the 90s
Only
started,
this year.
and none of them fruited ever again. You know, the ones I had stuck in there because we're getting cold winters. So we'll see. I mean, this year I'm really jazzed because this is the first year I've seen Asian pears produce in 20 years. They
So
actually
you're a
produce.
fan of climate change?
I'm a skeptic because I've seen it go back and forth.
Oh yeah.
So I am very skeptical of the climate. Well, I shouldn't talk too much about this. I'll get it. They did say that if you look at the Greenland ice sheet temperature record, which, you know, the IPCC won't talk about, 10,000 years ago, the temperature did this, and they said ever since it's been doing this. And we happen to be on an upswing, but the overall trend is going back down to an ice age. So if we get saved from an ice age from carbon dioxide era, then great. But they said the temperature has been doing this for the last 10,000 years. It's been gradually going down. That's why they had, a mini ice age around 1900, 1850s. And even they said John Muir noticed that, around 1880, that his glaciers were melting. It just does that. It just warms and cools, warms and cools. But we'll see. I mean, we'll see. I mean, Al Gore said that men had to be underwater by now. So we'll see. But anyway, get away from that one.
Is there a way to artificially increase chill hours, like if you plant it in the shade of another plant?
Right. So some of the things you can do. Now it's the individual buds on the branches that need the chill. It's not the ground. So there's no use throwing ice on the ground. What some orchards have done, like when Silicon Valley moved into the San Jose area, the cherry orchards there stopped producing because of that all the industry warmed up the temperatures at night. So they started painting the branches white to reflect the sunlight off them. Gave them a few more years of production. So painting the buds or the branches white does help a bit. But generally where you place them in a yard makes a big difference too. So especially if you're on a sloped area, if you have a fence, the cold air collects behind that fence. At our old store, when we were in Lake Forest, we had a property that was sloped. From top to bottom, it was about 15-foot drop off. We had a solid fence at the bottom of our nursery, and that year, 1990, we had a frost. We noticed that the brown line in our nursery was equivalent to the height of that fence. So the fence trapped that real cold air, and everything below the fence top was brown from frost. Everything above the fence height was green. It was so strange that fence trapped that cold air, and everything behind it at that level froze. So also if you have a house. So my last house I owned had a 5-foot eave. Below the eave, you don't get any cold air because I had what is called a starfruit tree that grew out like this. Everything outside the eave froze. So you don't want to plant things too close to your house because the house keeps them warm. But on the north side of the house, everything's colder on this side especially, so like at my last house, I had a 2-story house, and in the wintertime, the shade from a 2-story house on the north side would come out about 15 foot, 20 foot. So that's where I put my cherry trees and my peach trees and pluots that need more chill. I put them on the north side. You need sun on them to sweeten your fruit. Well, in the summertime, the sun only goes about a foot out from the wall. So you can use the north side of a house, north side of a big evergreen tree, north side of any wall to give your trees a little more chill in the winter. And the south side is going to be less than normal chill in the winter. So, yeah, so shady sides of things, any place where the cold air is trapped, that also helps. Grass helps keep the area cooler, whereas pavement keeps it a bit warmer. That's
No, no, you know, but you feel like they sometimes say they use a white. Is it possible that they can make up a different to the food?
possible. Not likely. I mean, if you use white latex paint, well, you can use the whitewash that the professionals use too. So the whitewash that we sell there, which is quite expensive, is a mixture of diatomaceous earth. Diatomaceous earth is just the same material as sand. So, and it reflects, sand. If you look at a sand crystal underneath the magnifying glass, it's white, it's clear. But diatomaceous earth, and they mix it with dried milk, and you spray it on, and it's pretty white. And there's nothing. It's organic. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. So. Now, just so you know, fruit trees do use a lot of water, so we hope by the time these trees get big that you'll have more water to apply to them. The average fruit tree, say if you keep a fruit tree 5 foot wide and 8 foot tall, you're probably talking about 3 or 4 gallons a day, every day. A 15-foot wide tree uses 50 gallons of water a day in the summertime. So yeah, that's summertime. So 3 or 4 gallons a day for a tree that's this big and that tall, and then 50 gallons for a full-size tree. That's what we've been told. That's,
If your trees have gotten too big, it's winter the time they bring them back to 5 feet wide.
I would do it in the summer or at least well before fall starts. So if you have a tree that's now, again, with some trees, you'll kill them by doing that. If you have a stone fruit tree and you make it real small, you're causing so much damage to that tree, you might as well start over. If it's an apple tree, no problem. But if you prune a branch on most fruit trees during the summertime, they regrow. So if you even cut it down to a stump, they've got enough time, and as long as say it's August still, they've got time to regrow several feet, and those branches can fruit the next year. If you prune them in winter, of course, you're not going to get fruit for that next year. But if you prune them before fall starts, you've got a chance to get more growth that can make flowering wood. The flower buds form where the leaves are attached in the fall.
What if you pruned 2 days ago and it was a fig tree?
What kind of tree?
Fig?
Well, figs fruit off of 1-year-old growth, and figs they don't stop growing in the fall.
Okay.
Figs will grow all the way into winter. There are some trees that don't fall the season. Stone fruit falls it to the letter where they won't grow at all in the fall.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's not 100% true, but basically that's true with stone fruit trees. They won't grow past the first day of fall. Apples, we think, actually can.
So when should you prune apples? I always was told January, but
Okay, for all these fruit trees, height control, which is to get all the stuff you don't want to fruit the next year off, summertime. So all summer long, if the tree's too tall, just cut it back, cut it back, cut it back. You don't want that growth above your tree, shading your tree. You don't want that. You want to keep the top of the tree, not something on top of that. So if you want to keep your tree, say 7 foot tall, which is a nice height so you can reach your fruit, whatever grows above that all summer long, cut that off. In wintertime, we do the thinning of the branches. You can do that in summer too, but it's easier to see when there's no leaves. So in January, we do a lot of thinning. You know, if there's too many branches too close together, shading each other, thin them out so there's room in between.
Okay, so that's where I got that January idea, I guess.
In January,
That's the time you think.
well, in the old days, you know, if you have an old book, they'll say only prune in winter because if you prune in summer, it bleeds. And they thought bleeding was bad. Well, now we know bleeding is good because it keeps the bugs out of the cut wounds. So it's better actually prune trees when they're awake, not when they're sleeping, because they have no defense at that time. But fortunately, in the wintertime, there's no bugs out either.
Oh,
But the reasoning that they had, you know, they didn't want the tree to bleed is false. It's better to have trees bleed when you prune them, because that's their protection.
so what about all those suckers that come in after trees? You think?
Right. Don't want that
Can you do that anytime?
anytime.
Okay.
No, the sooner you do it, the better. You want, and you know, we have a lot of fall left. So if you see on this branch here, cut it down to here now, so these leaves are now getting the most sunlight. They'll still make flower buds. Generally, the leaves at the top of the branch get the most energy. So if you want to lower that now, then you'll lower the top of your tree.
It's too late to fertilize this plant here.
Well, they're not programmed to grow, so if you fertilize, the fertilizer will, a lot of it will stay there. You'll lose some of it over winter. I mean, in nature, there's always plenty of fertilizer around. Um, you know, on average in nature, there's 5 inches of dead leaves on the ground. There's a lot of nutrition in there. So it's not like you don't have, you know, if you fertilize it, there's nothing wrong with most of these trees because they're not programmed to do anything now anyway. You just might waste some fertilizer. Now, it's not true with all fruit trees. If you have an orange tree, citrus trees, if you fertilize this time of year, you might induce a off-season crop, get more growth on them because citrus grow year-round. So with citrus, we don't like to fertilize oranges, tangerines, grapefruits past midsummer. But with these trees, it's not a big deal. Now, with a few trees, over-fertilizing causes trouble, primarily the stone fruit. If you give them too much nitrogen, you can induce, now it's mainly a problem on nectarines. Nectarines are the most problematic. If you have too much nitrogen around, they said the skin on nectarines won't mature and they tend to rot just as they're ripened. So if you have a lot of what's called brown rot, fruit rotting just when it ripens, that's too much nitrogen fertilizer. With other fruit trees, it's not as big a deal. Okay, so the chill, the stone fruits have chill. And so you have to watch that. If you live on flat ground, Orange County, don't get too many things above 300 hours of chill. There's a lot of fruit trees right at 300 hours, so it's real marginal for a lot of us. You know, back in the 80s and 90s, I always thought, well, most people get 400 hours chill because we were getting 400 hours of chill those years, but now we're getting about 300 hours of chill max. So that's so we're having to choose more carefully now on fruit trees. Hopefully, we'll get more chill again in the future. We'll see. We'll see. Also, the growers are bringing us more trees that have lower chill among the stone fruits. We're getting every year we get every few years we get a new one that needs less chill than the others. Now, apples are interesting because apples have quota chill requirements, but if they don't get it, they still produce. So they'll still bloom when it gets warm, no matter what. And it's interesting. So we do have, if you look at our apple list, we do have two groups of apples. There's the low chill apples that are naturally low chill, Dorset Golden, Anna apple. Dorset's from Bahamas, Anna's from Israel. And we've carried more in the past. Einschmier's from Israel, and there's one more low chill apple. But they all wake up in February. They get a little bit of winter, they start waking up. All the other apples keep waiting for winter, waiting for winter. We never completes their chill requirement. But once we get to May, they said, well, it's warm, let's wake up. So they usually start blooming. Most of them either late April. This year would have been late April because we had that 100-degree weather in April this year. Um, and then they'll sporadically bloom all the way until summer because they can't figure out the spring. Different parts of the tree wake up at different times. So up in Oregon, there's this book, apple book I have from Oregon. They said, yeah, what's with California, because in Oregon, every apple has this 2-week window where it blooms. So you have to put Fuji next to a Gala because they bloom at the same time for pollination purposes. But in Southern California, all the late blooming apples, ones that are supposed to bloom between April and May, tend to bloom from May through July. They just bloom, a few flowers every day on the whole tree. They just keep blooming. So you can almost have any two apple trees you want, other than Anna and Dorset Golden, and they'll pollinate each other because they're blooming. They bloom all the way through mid to late spring into early summer. And because most of those apples ripen in the fall, they've got time to ripen. They've got time to develop over summer and get the apples ripe. The few apples that we can't grow here successfully, unfortunately, one of them is Honeycrisp, which is, everybody's favorite apple nowadays is Honeycrisp, but it ripens in August. And it needs 1,000 hours of chill since it's from Minnesota, or 1,500 hours. So it always, we grew Honeycrisp for like 10 years. We just want to see if we can get any apples at all. We got apples. The problem with Honeycrisp is it wakes up in July. Finally by July it says, okay, it's time to get going. And it's got 5 or 6 weeks to make fruit. So the apples turn out that big. They taste fine. They taste like Honeycrisp. But they don't have time to size up. The coldest winter we've seen was 2008, where it just stayed cold all spring that year. The Honeycrisp got to about apricot size. And that's the biggest we've seen them do. They do fine in Riverside, because Riverside has more chill than we do here. But here, that's the only apple, you call it, they both say, oh, it makes fruit. They don't tell you how good the fruit is. It's like that big. Yes.
So if you love Honeycrisp, what variety is that? Like,
Anna is close. Sundowner, well, I would just tell you the best apple we've grown in this area is Sundowner. We'll go in more detail when we get the apple class up.
so what about the fairly new apple that I've had and I really like is Cosmic Crisp?
Oh, that's a good one. Most breeders give orchards 10-year exclusivity. I ever pronounce that word? Yeah. So we can't get those for 10 years.
Oh,
Same, that's what happened. Pink Lady came out in the 90s, and we didn't get that till 2000 and something. They gave 10 years on the commercial market before. It's kind of weird. I mean, homeowners never grow that many compared to the orchards. Why they wouldn't let homeowners have that early, but that's what they do. They give them 10 years.
that might be the same as Honeycrisp needing more hours, cold hours.
Well, some of them, like a daughter of Honeycrisp is Sweet Tart, I think. Now it's created in New York, and most of the New York apples have done well in our area. Like Johnny Gold was made by New York, and it does fine here.
Oh,
So we're hoping that the other daughters of Honeycrisp don't need as much cold, and they'll wake up a little bit earlier and ripen later. That's the thing. They have to ripen later. Uh, the best apples we grow, I think, are from Australia, which has as much chill as we have or less. So like Granny Smith, which is a weird one, it's from Sydney. Sydney is the same latitude as Mazatlan, Mexico. They grow Granny Smith apples next to pineapples in Australia. And Pink Lady and Sundowner from the other,
New Zealand.
which is the same latitude as Los Angeles. So those apples are really well adapted to our climate. Sundowner and Pink Lady, they ripen in winter. So that's how long they have to be on the tree to get to full size this winter here. But they're really good. Both of those apples are really
It's
good.
really a good choice.
Yeah, we haven't seen that available to us either. No, I haven't looked that one up.
I look for the crisp and
Honeycrisp has a lot of siblings and offspring that are really good. We had one a few years ago that, occasionally we can grab something from Dave Wilson that we're not supposed to get because they'll have, at the end of their season, they'll have some trees that are left over. And sometimes I see names on there. I said, I'm not supposed to get that. And I order it, and sometimes I get it. So this one year it was either a sibling or offspring of Honeycrisp, and we grew it for a couple of years, and it made good apples, and they tasted like brown sugar. It was really good, but it's not on their list anymore, so I don't know what happened to that one. But yeah, so we'll always look. We always reorder stuff in winter that we're selling really fast. We'll try, and I always look at the list, scanning it for some of those weird things. But other things come off the list of no sale, so then sometimes we get that. So we'll look for that. So apples get by without their chill, um, and most of them will produce here. I mean, Dave Wilson actually put into the Irvine Orchard, Irvine Field Station, University of California, Riverside Irvine Field Station, all the apples in their catalog to see how they did. That's how he learned all this. But we've been growing apples like I grew Red Delicious back in the 90s, and it turned out just fine. I'm going, well, this is weird. Red Delicious apples here. But every apple we tried did fine. So now there's some apples we don't bother to get because they're not as good, but Brayburn, all the apples we're getting in are really, really, really good.
yeah. Can I ask you about apricot? How is their chill?
Well, it's on their list, so you can. So we have the chill for. We don't list the chill for apples, but we list it for all the apricots, apriums, all those other trees. The chill is listed there, so you can kind of get a. And there's no chill that's been found scientifically. So all the chills, we're just estimating the chill because we get different, things happen differently every year. So every year, after about 10 years of growing this thing, we go, okay, this must be the chill on it. We've seen this fruit 3 out of the last 10 years, so this must be the chill. We see this fruit every year, so this must be the chill. We're always having to refigure it because whatever Dave Wilson says, they usually say 500 hours or less because they don't know. They have 500 hours of chill up there. So they have no clue what the chill is until we get to them, and then we start putting our numbers down. They start looking at what's happening in Southern California, and they start changing the numbers too. So like Lapine's cherry said 700 to 1,000 hours till I got it by mistake one year, and it fruited the second year. I'm going, well, this is really weird. So now they're saying 400 hours or less, but it's in my yard in Mission Viejo, it never missed a year, which is really weird. It never missed a year. So the chill on it had to be 300 hours or less, but it still wakes up kind of late, which is kind of odd too. There's some trees that don't need much chill, but they wake up late. So the other trees that don't need chill, so you have mulberries, jujubes, persimmons, um, well, those are the main ones we're selling bare root that don't require chill. That's pretty much all. Don't require chill. They just wake up when we get a certain temperature. And the reason we figure this out, so if we have normal weather, some of the jujubes won't wake up till about April or May most years. They need to be really warm. But when we had no winters and the peaches weren't waking up at all, the jujubes woke up in January and started flowering in January. And the persimmons did too. The less winter we had and the hotter the winter, the sooner they woke up. So we know those guys aren't operating on a minimum chill requirement. They have no chill, even though most references still say they have a requirement. We know it's probably all they need is not to have any leaves on them in warm weather, and they'll start growing. So we know like on mulberries, if you have a mature mulberry tree, anytime you want, pull off all the leaves, they bloom and start making new leaves and make another crop. So we've seen that. I did that with a mulberry tree in the 90s. It made its crop around May, June. So we stripped, and this was a tree with a trunk about that big. So we stripped some branches and leaves, and I got another crop. So we did it again late, and that was midsummer. So we stripped it again and got a crop in early fall. So you can get multiple crops on certain trees if the fruit ripens quickly and they don't have a chill requirement. I haven't tried it on jujubes because their crop takes too long to develop. Their crop is always early fall before it ripens, so they don't have time to make another crop. Now, a lot of the early apples, some apples ripen in June, July, and August. You can probably get a second crop on those. Okay.
I
Yes.
have one more question about, I was reading last night that nectar plums, Spice Z, and it said our best nectarine. My nectarine tree just died, and I don't even know how old it was. I think I planted it at least 30 years ago, and it's been the most faithful, small. I don't know what kind it was or any of that, but it just died. So, I don't know what happened. I think it just died of old age.
Yeah,
But,
I mean, 15 years is old age.
yeah, well, that's what I was surprised. But anyway, I just wondered if there's anything I should do after digging it up nice to prepare the soil for
Okay, good
another
thing you
tree.
said that. So there is something called a replant syndrome,
Ah,
and so generally on farms they always rotate crops. So if they're growing, so if Dave Wilson's growing apple trees in one plot for a crop, a 2-year crop, they're not going to grow apples there again for 5-10 years. They'll put in peaches or grapes or something else into that area because what the trees leave behind when you pull them out is a bunch of dead roots. So when you pull a bare root tree out of the ground, you're only getting maybe half the root system, maybe less than that. So the ground, after they pull these trees out of the ground, is full of dying apple roots now. And you put a new apple tree in there, it won't grow. It won't kill it, but it just sits there for years and years and years, and then gets going after those dead apple roots are finally finished decomposing. Then the tree starts growing.
so I shouldn't plant anything more and just leave it.
Well, just don't put it in that spot.
Well, okay. So they did. UC Davis did the study in an apple orchard. So they said if you remove an apple tree in an orchard, existing orchard, because somebody ran over it or something, they want to put another apple tree in there. They found out if they dig a hole 18 inches deep and 3 foot wide, that was enough clean dirt. Put another apple tree in there, it did really well.
Okay, so if I remove that much dirt,
Right.
say it again, 18 inch?
Well, that's for if you want a 10-foot wide tree. If you only want it 5 foot wide, you may only have to make a hole about this big.
that
So
was-
maybe 2 foot wide, 1 foot deep, and fill it with dirt from another part of your yard. Or, I mean, really, you could use our top pot. Sand is fine too. Just put something that doesn't have dead nectarine roots in it or anything related. You don't want, peaches, nectarines, cherries, apricots, aprims, pluots, pleuries, plums are all can be on the same exact root system. So,
so I shouldn't plant another nectarine.
or well, not in that same soil, but yeah, you can
But I mean,
change
if
it.
I took this, so I could plant.
Mhm.
I'm just curious to know about this nectar,
It's a good one.
spice Z.
That's a
Is it
good
taste
fruit.
really good?
Tastes like a white nectarine.
It's really good. Oh, you have one? Oh. Wow. So can you confine that to?
Oh yeah, just keep it trimmed. They're easy to trim.
Oh, okay.
You were saying that you can plant them like okay. Do they feel like hybrids? They can make not like every plant different like what? No. Well, what happens is their seeds are hybrids, not the fruit. So yeah, if you so a lot of these really weird fruits, like pleuries is one of the newest things, plum cherry. Whereas there's something called a peocotum, which is peach. There's 3 things in that peocotum. But anyway, so there's a breeding company, the Zyger family, who's been breeding all these fruit trees for Dave Wilson for generations now. And they'll cross peach and an apricot, which don't usually work in nature. So what they say they do is they'll take the pollen out of apricot, say, and then stick it in the flower of peach, and wait a few days, and then we know that that fruit can never form with that combination, but they rescue the embryo that's in there because the embryo is still alive, even though the flower is about to abort the whole thing because it's a weird combination. The embryo's in there, so they call it embryo rescue. So they do these crosses. It's not quote the same way as GMO where they take genes from flies or turtles and put them in there. They just take the pollen from 2 different plants that normally don't cross, and they take the embryo out of the developing or the failing bud, little fruit, and grow it in a petri dish. And then they raise that to see what they get. So they've done all these crosses that normally wouldn't work, cherries with plums, apricots with peach, all these crosses, and they're getting all kinds of different things, and some really good ones too. I mean, a lot of the best selling fruit now are crosses like the nectar plum, that's nectarine and plum. One of the weird things is they said, peaches and nectarines, they don't know what's going on there because a lot of times they're breeding peaches with peaches and they get nectar. And nectarines may often give rise to peaches, so their genetics are too close. They said they don't know what to expect when they cross nectarines and peaches. But anyway, they're doing all that research and getting all kinds of new things out. The top seller for us the last few years, the quickest seller, has been the pleuries. So this is one of the pleuries that has done real well, called Sweet Treat. So it's a plum cherry hybrid. The fruit is the fruit on Sweet Treat's about the size of an egg. They had them at Trader Joe's this last summer. About the size of a smallish egg. The problem with a lot of these hybrids, they have to be cross-pollinated with something else. Now, in theory, this will cross with this plum. The problem is this Santa Rosa plum, which is the best tasting plum we sell, needs about 320, maybe 350 hours of chill. This needs about 100 hours less. Now, this year, everything bloomed at the same time. It was so cool in December and so hot in February that this year, practically the entire yard bloomed at the end of February. Everything was blooming. Everything was blooming in February and March, so they would have crossed. But most years, if we get our chill in spurts, get a little chill in December, a little chill in January, get a little chill in February, this thing will bloom a month before that one will, and it won't work. So we want to have two of them around that bloom at the same time. Turns out candy hearts, which is another fluery, blooms right on top of sweet treat, or maybe a few days before sweet treat, but they overlap for most of the bloom period. And candy heart's really good too. So sweet treat has the texture of a cherry but tastes like a plum. Candy heart, texture of a plum, tastes like a cherry. And the candy heart's about the size of a cherry, but they've not failed us at all. We get enough chill for both of those every winter. We've gotten good crops on those, so we're real pleased with them, and they're heavy producers too. So everybody with candy heart and sweet treats, they bring me the fruit. They go, "This is incredible tasting." So that's a nice one. More reliable than the pluots. There are a few pluots that are very reliable, but these two pluries have been the best. Now there's another plury we sell, Flavor Punch, fruited this year, been in fruit the year before, so it probably needs around 300 hours to chill. So be careful with again what you choose. So there's very few. The other thing you have to watch out for is the ripening time. So if you get on Dave Wilson's website, they actually have this chart. Now this is an old chart, so it doesn't have all the new varieties on it, but they have about 95% of all the varieties that are on one chart. It tells you the ripening dates.
We want one of those.
It's on their website. You can order it straight from
A
Dave
poster
Wilson.
on the wall.
Yeah. And Dave Wilson sells these for, I don't know, they'll tell you on their website how much you can buy them for. They don't give me any free ones anymore, so I don't give these away. But now this is ripening dates for their area, Central Valley. So the problem with this, of course, too, is that it can be off. Well, they say every year up there, it's off by a week or two, too. So the trees ripen different times every year, just depending on when, according to the temperature every year. Now, the problem we have here, so the main problem we have here is our springs are a lot cooler than they are up north. So even though, like, there's a peach called Sazi Swirl, donut style peach that ripens here in May. Now, if the sun's not out in May, we have May gray, it got no taste. Whereas if you're in Fresno, it tastes great. So that's one of the things we worry about. So the problem with stone fruit is most stone fruit that don't need much chill, wake up early, fruit ripens early. So that's one thing you have to worry about. A lot of the the low chill peaches ripen in April. So there's a lot of low chill peaches they use in Florida and Arizona that ripen in April because in Florida in April it's already 90 degrees. In Arizona it's already 80, 90 degrees. It's perfect for ripening peaches there. In the middle of summer in Arizona when it's 120, peaches that just burn up. So they want them to ripen in April. If you're in Arizona, you get a peach, I think it's early Gran that ripens in April here. It's got no taste at all. You get hundreds and hundreds of peaches that have no flavor. So yeah, you have to watch the ripening dates too. You have to look at the charts or look at what we say. And so our best peach is one that has pretty low chill. It needs less than 300 hours, and it ripens in late July, early August. That's the August Pride peach. It's been our best peach because it does that. We have a little more chill. Red Baron, slightly better, but Red Baron hasn't produced really well since around 2012. So, but in the 90s and up until 2012, Red Baron was our best peach. Now August Pride is because August Pride hasn't really missed a year. Even those winters without a winter, it would still make 2 or 3 peaches at the right time, whereas most of our other peach trees wouldn't wake up. They just wouldn't wake up until, the things that didn't get their chill, they woke up in August. I mean, we used to throw them away in June. Now we know, if you keep them until August, they'll start growing. But they would wake up in August, make a few flowers, a few leaves, and that's it. They wouldn't do a thing. So that's
But they have to spread the liquid water when it's really hot.
no,
Never have at all.
no. We're not nearly like if you lived in Fresno, where all these things are at their best. The nights are 80s, the days are just around 100, and that's normal for these trees. I mean, where these trees come from, that's their climate. Georgia, central China, where a lot of this stuff comes, northern India, uh, Iran, those areas. These guys are used to having it really hot. Now, the one tree that has trouble in the heat, apples and cherries, which makes sense. Um, I mean, apples do fine because our air temperature is not that hot. We just don't have the rain. So, like in Oregon, they said there's no way you can grow good apple orchards in California because in Oregon they've got 5 foot of wet ground below the tree. They said they like that, whereas we don't have it. I mean, we watered the ground maybe a foot deep for these trees. We don't want to waste that much water, but they said in Oregon there's so much reserve down there, 5 foot of water down there, and the apple trees don't get it. So if your apple trees start doing this, getting the brown tips, you got to water more.
Yeah, water the plant. Right.
Right, water the ground. I mean, in 1996, I had a whole bunch of apple trees, and they're all looking kind of sad because I hadn't changed my water since I planted them. I go, what's wrong with my apple trees? And then next year, 1998, 35 inches of rain. The apples look wonderful. I go, okay, I just needed more water on them. So,
Now, when they look like that, you train them or just let them live like they live at our courthouse?
just leave them be. Yeah, it's still 85% functional. I would just leave that on there. So this apple tree, if this was in the ground, we'd be training it already. So one branch straight up, all the other branches try to get them horizontal, tie them down or put weights on them.
You train that one, you would chop the tip, right? Because you wanted to have like 5 feet diameter, right?
Right, so you can cut. Well, when you pull a branch horizontal, it stops growing. So when a branch is pointing upwards, it grows. If you take it down, especially if you take it down below horizontal, it won't grow. So like some people want to make apple espaliers. When you're making an apple espalier, you have to keep the tip pointed up. And then as it grows, you lay it down. So that's one good thing. Oh yeah, if the branches are like this, it stops growing. That's true for most trees.
Find the exact where the is because of the sun rising or like because of the sun.
Well, if you have your tree fairly evenly spaced out, you know, most of the tree will get sunlight. I don't know. It's kind of weird. They did studies on citrus because the fruit on the north side of the trees don't get any sun. And they kind of wondered, that's even that side of the tree, the leaves don't get much sun. They wonder what it does to the fruit. And they found out that when they tested the amount of what's in the fruit, they said, yeah, the north side of the tree, they only have half as much sugar and half as much acidity as the south side of the fruit. But taste-wise, they couldn't tell any difference. So it's interesting. They said, yeah, fruit on north, there's not as much nutrition in there, but the ratio between the acidity and the sugar was the same. So they said the food on the north side tastes exactly the same. No one can tell the difference, but the food on the south side has much more nutrition.
And then everybody shoot me for like even yellow at the time.
Well, a lot of the orchards, like apple orchards, they're starting to spalliate them on fences now, and they arrange the roads north south so that each side of the tree gets the same amount of light. So if you want, so if you want, you can also do your trees that way, just flat, so that they get sun on two sides. Most fruit trees aren't worth spelling, but apple trees, because the branches live a long time, are worth it because you can have the same branch be productive for decades. Whereas most of these other fruit trees, um, you're getting rid of branches within 5 or 10 years. That branch is no longer productive. So the tree's regrowing new stuff all the time. I rarely ever staked up anything. Most of these, they're like, they're pretty like fishing poles. The only reason you would stake them up is to support the weight of fruit. Persimmons overload terribly. Most other fruit trees don't overload unless you don't thin them out good. Oh, so on most fruit trees, you need to thin out your fruit. Typical, now we don't thin out cherries, we don't thin out apricots, we rarely thin out plums, but peaches, you're thinning 90% of your crop every spring, so it's a bit of work. Because if this was a peach tree, every leaf has a flower bud that makes a fruit. So you get your peaches a few inches apart. When you do that, your peaches turn out to be about thumbnail size, all seed. So you've got to thin out peaches to about every 8 inches. So you're cutting off 90% of your crop. Now, there's a few peaches like the August Pride we talked about in Red Baron. They don't make as much fruit. But some of these other peach trees, every single flower bud makes a fruit. You got to spend a few minutes thinning out your tree. Apples usually make between 3 and 7 apples in a cluster. You only want one. If you have 2 apples in a cluster, you usually get worms in both. So on apples and pears, you don't want any fruit touching each other or touching a branch. So there's a bug here called the codling moth that has to hide its eggs. If they've laid an egg on the side of an apple, a ladybug or a lacewing larva or something else come by and eat the egg. So they hide their eggs where 2 fruit touch each other. And so when you have 2 apples touching, there's a wormhole in both of them right where they touch. Because that's where the moth laid the eggs. Make sure you thin them out so there's only 1 apple. And sometimes you have to thin out if the clusters are too close together. You have to, these are actually parts of 2 clusters. You got to thin out the other cluster. Just take the other cluster off. It's too close. So the other thing, okay, among fruit trees, nectarines need the most spraying, but we have to spray 2 things on them in the winter. That's not too bad. But we have to do it. There's bugs on nectarines that will get into the flowers that will scar the fruit so badly the fruit won't look edible. Nectarines and nectar plums, if you don't spray them when they're blooming, you can throw your crop away. So nectarines are the most sprayed fruit tree, but the stuff we have is both of them are organic. So peaches and nectarines, then we do the same on both. We hit them with the copper spray in the middle of winter because they often get what's called peach leaf curl. If it rains more than 5 inches, leaves get these red blisters all over them. All the nectar plums, nectarines, peaches get that. If it rains, close to 10 inches, you get these blisters, and those leaves end up falling off. The tree regrows new ones, but you wasted a whole bunch of the tree's energy making new leaves where you could have just protected them. So you spray them with the copper spray in winter, and then when they bloom, you spray them with one of the spinosad products we have, which is also organic. You spray them to keep the bugs out of the flowers. Peaches don't get the one that messes up the skin of the fruit. The nectarines get a really bad one, a little thrip in the flower, and the thrip scars the developing embryo, and you get these streaks and oozing holes on the side. It looks terrible. But we usually do peaches and nectarines both because there's another bug that wakes up when they're blooming called the ornamental fruit moth that drills through the stem of the fruit into the fruit, so it's right there at the pit. You can't tell. I mean, with apples, you can see there's a hole in it. With a peach and nectarine, the thing goes right through the stem into right where the pit is. And you take a bite and you see this worm at the pit. Well, you can stop them when the tree's blooming by spraying with the spinosad product because they have 5 generations a year of the ornamental fruit moth. The first generation eats flower petals. and you can wipe them out at that time. So those are the now apples and pears. You may grow apple and pears for decades without ever seeing fire blight, but that's their worst problem is fire blight. If you have a lot of bee activity, you can pick up fire blight pretty easy. So fire blight, disease that affects that the bees bring to your tree. When they're blooming, the bees will have it on them, and they'll suck on the flower, get the pollinate your flowers, and then the fire blight disease kills the flower and then works its way down the stem and can wipe out a young tree. So you have to watch for that too. There is a spray we have that's not organic, but it's basically considered a fertilizer that you spray. It's called garden floss. You spray on apples and pears when they're blooming, you'll stop it. Now I grew apples for 20 years before I saw that. So, and you just watch your flowers. If the flower petals turn tan when they're drying up, you're fine. If they turn black when they're dying, that's fire blight. Then you just pick off that whole flower cluster. You go, okay, let's take this off before it gets into the rest of the tree. And a note on pollination, most of the fruit trees do not require pollination. Apples will make fruit without it, but they make a little better quality fruit if they're pollinated. So if they're not pollinated, so in my house I grew Anna and Dorset. I love Anna, didn't like Dorset, pulled the Dorset out. They both bloom in February, or their apples do. But without the pollinator around, the Anna apple, some of the fruit was flat, and it certainly wasn't as big as it normally would be, but they still made a lot of fruit. And the reason for that is if I have the Dorset next to the Anna, they'll have 5 or 6 seeds in each fruit. If I only had the Anna, you got 1 or 2 seeds in each fruit. And if there's only 1 seed, your fruit's really lopsided. So yeah, you get bigger fruit and better looking fruit if you have more than one variety of apple around. Same with pears. They'll make fruit without pollinators, but you'll get a better pear. Most of the stone fruit don't eat it, but the pluots, the pleuries, the apriums are helped by it. But the true plums, true apricots don't eat it, and our peaches don't eat it. Nectarines do not need a pollinator either. Jujubes helps them a lot. So jujube tree without a pollinator, 10 to 30 fruits. With the pollinator, 100 to 300 fruits. You get a lot more jujubes if you have a pollinator. The books do say they don't require it. A lot of the old books, that's because jujubes sucker like crazy. This is actually a sucker growing off this tree. And jujubes bloom on new growth. So the suckers always bloom. So if you allow a sucker to grow on your jujube, you don't have to buy another tree to pollinate this because the sucker is genetically different, and the flowers on the sucker will pollinate that. That's why in in the textbooks they probably had a problem. They said, well, jujubes don't need pollinators. Well, if you don't cut off all your suckers, you don't need a pollinator. In my yard, I trim all my suckers off. I had one jujube tree, and I cut the suckers off because I wanted to be real clean back there. And the thing would only make 10 to 30 fruit a year. I'm going, oh, this is stupid. Because the books say it's self-fertile, and the trees at our store make more fruit. So I took home another one, and suddenly my tree is making 300 fruit. Well, if I just let the suckers grow, I would have gotten the full set of fruit. So, no, it's generally it's got to be really close. Plums, pollinate plums, pluots, pleuries, apricots will pollinate an aprium. There's one persimmon that needs pollination. That's the coffee cake persimmon. Coffee cake persimmon will make hundreds of persimmons without pollination. They're totally inedible. I mean, I did in my house. I'm going, they're gorgeous. I should be able to ripen this somehow. So if a coffee cake has seeds in it, it needs the chocolate. The only thing that can pollinate is chocolate. So if you have a chocolate next to your coffee cake, the coffee cake makes seeds. the flesh is brown or swirls the brown in there, and it's fine. It tastes really good. If you don't have the chocolate nearby, the flesh is orange. There's no seeds, and you can't make the darn thing. I tried all the tricks in the book to make that thing ripen, and it wouldn't ripen. It just stayed rubbery. So coffee cake needs chocolate. Do not plant it without a chocolate.
I think we should enlighten me and have 4 years.
Well, if you get a good bloom, you should be making food. Something's knocking it off. I mean, I do have problems sometimes with birds pecking at the buds.
I'm so. And I will say that this fall, spray for the rest, because I've heard you do that. But I noticed it has all kinds of like little pinholes.
That's okay. That's all. I mean, you didn't get anything this year, huh? I mean, the other thing that you can do to mess up a crop would be not to water enough when they're in bloom. It's got to be pretty wet.
Right.
Because if you get a good bloom,
You better in the ground.
I have a good feeling about the temperature this winter, so I think you should do well.
Because I'm a farmer, so
Mm.
and everything was fine with that. And I was coloring.
But you are in Trabuco.
Yeah.
So it's cold now.
Close to Portola Hill, just before the Silverado Canyon. So for up on the hill there, I mean, my backyard got 115.
Then, most of us here got 108, so it wasn't that different.
So I just, but I'll try to.
Yeah, when I lived on a hilltop in Mission Viejo, which is probably similar to your situation, all throughout the 90s, we had great crops of red bear. After 2000, not so good. But I'm thinking we're going back to that weather where it's cooler again.
Do you think the red barons would do okay, like here?
This year they did pretty good.
We're good, because I'm close to here.
Yeah. Now we've been watching the
I'm on my way.
neighborhood. They actually bloomed last year real well too, and this year. So red baron, yeah.
But that swazi swirl that I just ordered, I should cancel.
Well, this year they tasted really good. May was warm. We didn't have much May gray this year.
So you hold out hope for that.
Well, we still sell them because it's what so like 3 years ago, the first 2 weeks, I mean, so I swirl made fruit for the entire month. The first 2 weeks, they were really bland, but the last 2 weeks, they were really good. Just depends, we eventually get sun on them, but yeah, if we had the entire year May go gray, then you're not going to get much taste.
Okay.
Okay,
Oh, yeah.
that's good. That's it for today. Thank you.
Thank you.